Psychoanalysis and philosophy. Today's topic is That is Who I Am. This is something we have all heard from everyone at a point when one feels one can't improve oneself and he has to be accepted as he is. In normal parlance, that's not so much of an issue. Everyone has imperfections and we have to forgive something in everyone. But when this is used by somebody who has a pathology and who has come for treatment, this statement acquires quite a different meaning. In that context, we will explore this subject. Who am I? Eternal question of philosophy and spirituality. Psychoanalysis does not go into the philosophical question, so it does not go into the question of who am I in the philosophical sense. Psychoanalysis deals with this question in the clinical context and in a psychological sense. Everyday definition of this question, who am I, would be given in a very colloquial way, that a person is described by his demography, his psychography, and the social context in which he is situated in a specific way. The asset position of the person, the liability position of the person, the hierarchical position of the person, all of them put together are used by the person to describe himself and say, this is who I am. So just as everyone has this question, who am I? Everyone also has an answer, who am I? Correct or incorrect, complete or incomplete, everyone has an answer. Deeper if we go beyond on the street colloquial understanding and we come to psychoanalysis, who am I acquires a different meaning. I am not only my conscious self, but I am also my unconscious self. And the unconscious is something that is outside of my awareness and control. And the whole of me actually is my conscious part and my unconscious part both put together. So I can't answer the question, who am I, without answering the question, what is my unconscious like? And since I don't know my unconscious fully, there is no way I can fully answer the question, who am I? So partial answer I can give to the extent that I know my unconscious, this is what I am. My unconscious and conscious put together. I then don't put a question to why my unconscious is what it is. Why are the laws of the unconscious what they are? Why is the unconscious outside of my awareness and control? I put all of them into the area of philosophy and spirituality outside of psychoanalysis. I don't go into the root of unconscious. I go to the operative part of the unconscious. I don't go into the ontological roots of the unconscious. That's a different story altogether. It's like, who is the father of the big other? If the big other is a set of laws, then why should the laws be what they are? And are there other more fundamental laws of which these laws that appear to us as laws are derivatives? Or even more deeply speaking, even more esoterically speaking, instrumentalities. So psychoanalysis would say, who am I? I am a human integer driven by survival, pleasure, and self-development. If you take the Jungian part, if you remove the Jungian part, you limit yourself to survival and pleasure. So I am a human integer driven by survival, pleasure, and development, structurally constituted of the conscious and the unconscious. And I can answer partly the question, who am I, based upon my knowledge of my conscious and a small knowledge of my unconscious. But a large part of the unconscious always remains unknown, and therefore who am I can always be answered only partly. Philosophy does not go always, I would not say never goes, but always it does not go into the limitations of the known and the knowability. And when we say large part of the unconscious cannot be known, it's a specific instance of our limited knowledge, limited known, and limited knowability. Known and knowability are much larger than they would appear only in the psychological context. They appear in all contexts. Philosophy, when answering this question, who am I, usually doesn't go deep into factoring the limited known and the limited knowability. Occasionally it does. Largely, it goes on certain lines, and the certain common lines into which philosophy goes in answering this question are this. One way to answer who am I is to say I am a hedonistic being, a pleasure-driven being. Another way philosophy answers this is to posit a moral being. Third is to look at the significance of the human integer in creation and put it up as the purpose of creation. Existential approach is to say we are a nobody thrown into an absurd world. A world where we have no absolute values, no absolute way how to live. And it is just you and me come together and create values and consensus and an idea of what is a good life. So one way to know who am I is to see oneself as a nobody thrown into an absurd world. The existential way of answering the question, who am I? And then there is an agnostic way which says nothing can be known, so nothing can be said, and nothing can be answered. And a nihilistic way to say it is nothingness all around. Or to answer by saying we are someone in quest of meaning, or we are someone in search of fulfillment, a more spiritual way of answering it. Spirituality comes to the same question of who am I? And the Abrahamical religions, they answer it by saying, referring to a concept of sin, atonement, and judgment, that we are sinners who have fallen into this world, and we have to do atonement and good deeds so that on the day of judgment we are profitably judged and we get salvation or heaven. An Eastern way of looking at it is to not look at sin, atonement, and judgment at all. The Hindu way of looking at it, and there are many ways, many Hindu ways of looking at it, there is not one, but one Hindu way of looking at who am I is I am a being of celebration, ananda, bliss. I come from bliss and I go to bliss. In between is ignorance, where I am away from bliss and I am caught up in suffering. And the whole goal is to overcome this ignorance and go back to my primal state of bliss, the state of Satchit Ananda. Another Hindu way of answering this is not to take recourse to the school of liberation and celebration, but go beyond it. Factor in the school of celebration and liberation, but say we are here also to change the world for the better. So not only to create a heaven for ourselves, but to create heaven on earth. The language of the Veda is to make earth and heaven equal and one. So not only go for spiritual liberation of the self, but to transform the world and everyone. And this is the way of answering who am I, that we are spiritual beings in spiritual evolution. And structurally, when I say who am I, it is not one thing but a confederation of many things. There is a surface being, an inner being, the psychic being, the central being, and one can go into a state of oneness with existence where all these experiences are deactivated. The experience of surface being, inner being, psychic being, central being, all are deactivated in this experience of oneness. And if I am to answer who am I, in evolution I am the psychic being, in eternity I am the central being. And in oneness I am one with existence. So this question becomes extremely complicated because consciousness takes different positions, and based on that the answer to who am I comes. But the ordinary answer to who am I is I am the psychic being. I am the psychic being in the true sense. In ignorance, I am the combination of surface and inner being. So most people function out of the surface and the inner being. Very few people get in touch with the psychic being. So for most people, the true answer, the authentic answer would be, I am the combination of surface and inner being. For some people, it would be, I am the psychic being. For some, it would be, I am the central being. For some, it would be, I am psychic, central, and all these beings. For some, it would be oneness, very rare. So this is the way we can look at the philosophical and spiritual aspect of who am I. In psychoanalysis, we are not going to deal so much with those aspects. Let us come to the context of psychoanalysis. The patient comes and says, this is who I am. And he may be saying this in the reference to a pathology he brings, and he finds nothing wrong with pathology in talking to you. And then the question comes, if he does not find anything wrong at all, why should he be with a psychotherapist? So we see a split in the patient. A part of him knows something is wrong, this is wrong, and a part of him tries to defend it and negate, deny that he has a problem. This may be because of a narcissistic constitution, it may be because of fragility, or both. In most cases, it is the fragility. The person is too fragile to accept that he has a problem. And in many cases, it's narcissism. So when a person says, especially in personality disorders, we find it very strongly, the person is identified strongly with the features of the disorder. He is identified with resistance to change. And therefore, as we go deeper in the therapy of personality disorders, we find this very often. The person says, this is who I am. This is how I have lived for all my life till now. I don't know what I am apart from this. If this is a problem and I have to let go of the problem, then I am nothing. Nothing is left in me. The problem and the derivative of the problems is all that I am. And this is a very difficult thing to move further. in the process of healing. This is what we say resistance to identify. First, it can be resistance to acceptance of problem, and then it can be identification with the problem. And these personality disorders in which we see this, that is who I am, very strongly. In milder cases, the milder form of this also can be seen in other pathologies where we see character pathology making an appearance. The person may not qualify for a personality disorder, but the character pathology makes an appearance in the process of healing. And there again we come to the same point that the defense is what he is, the pathology is what he is, and the question is, why should he do that? Why should he identify with resistance? Why should he identify with pathology? Why should he cling to that pathology? Why should he make it his own? Why should he fear so much to leave it, knowing fully well what is the price he is paying for it? He knows the price. And this brings us to the very important point that in character pathology and personality disorders, the problem is itself a part solution. It's a dysfunctional solution, but a part solution to something which is even more terrifying than this problem. So the person has chosen to identify with a problem, with a disorder feature, with a resistance, with a defense, because the alternative is even more terrifying. And what that alternative can be, we'll see in a few moments. So he has been constantly trying to avoid something more terrible than the disorder by choosing the disorder. And over a period of time, then it becomes a habit. It becomes natural. You normalize anything, so it becomes natural. And then it is just the habit of it, the naturality of it, the familiarity of it, the security with it, which creates a resistance to movement towards a healthy state. And after a long period of time living in that way, you create a fear of the new. There is a fear of the healthy state. It is the fear of the unknown. And in that problematic disorder state, a phenomena comes into being, what I call the tragic holding state. That the state of pathology is a state of suffering. It is a tragic state, but it has also provided a holding. The person has not gone to the worst alternative, more terrifying than the state of pathology. So the state of pathology in a way is a state of equilibrium, a dysfunctional equilibrium, but a better equilibrium than the more terrifying alternative. And therefore, in a pathological context, it has provided a holding. And the person has lived with it for so long, he has survived. And in many areas of life, he has grown also. So the state has provided survival, possibility of growth, possibility of some degree of happiness, some degree of success, and therefore some degree of holding. So the state of pathology is not only a tragic state, but also a holding state. It is not only cost and no benefit. There are some benefits also. There is a cost-benefit ratio. Not a positive ratio, but it is a ratio. It is a tragic holding state which the person has got used to and now fears leaving it. And there is a fear of the new, fear to move into a healthy state and give up the known state. Apart from it, there is a distinct profit of pathology. This is something which is overseen by most when we talk of why the person is continuing with pathology. Not only because the pathology is avoiding something more terrifying, not only because over a period of time it has become a new normal, not only because it's a tragic holding state which is providing holding also apart from the tragedy, not only because there is a masochism in the person which wants to hold on to it, not only because there is a narcissism in the person which wants to hold on to it to get gratification from the state of a wounded hero. All of those are true. But what is also true apart from those 5 reasons of holding on to a tragic pathological state is the fact that there is a distinct profit of pathology. And the first profit of pathology, and the most important and the least known, is the manic defense. In cases of character pathology and personality disorders, there is usually a strong manic defense. So inside there is a strong sadness, and the reaction formation defense is used to create a hypomanic state, a state of a high. It is not a manic state, pure manic state, it's a hypomanic state. And because it's a hypomanic state, it can endure forever. A full manic state has to crash, the body cannot take it. But this is at a level where it can endure forever. And this manic high is a inseparable addiction. And this manic defense is one of the strong reasons why the person is not ready to give up this intense secret pleasure. The person is slightly on a high, it's a micro hypomania. And its person is always on a high because of this manic defense. And this high, this cheerfulness, this effervescence, this micro euphoric feeling, the person does not want to give up. And this is one of the reasons why he holds on to that is who I am. Because that is who I am secretly gives this manic pleasure. Then there are secondary gains, well known. Freedom from responsibility, freedom from evaluation, freedom from being subject to strict standards, and then often it is accompanied by a perversion pleasure. That the person may be indulging in perversions and passing it off as that is who I am. So there is a secret perversion pleasure, and often we find one corner of perversion strong or weak in many of these situations. Often these situations of personality disorders and character pathology also come along with a superego pathology. And this can be both superego pathology of harshness and the superego pathology of superego defect, depletion. So there is a perversion pleasure also. And all of this makes the person cling on to that is who I am and resist change for healing. Although he comes, pays money, invests time and energy for healing, and yet he resists that is who I am. And the irrational motivations why he resists change and clings on to this is who I am are these reasons. How deep one goes to find the real me. In some cases, the real me has to be found below the pathological me. In some cases, the real me has to be recreated, or rather created, as we dismantle the pathological me. In some cases, there is a proto-real me, and the pathological me, as it gets dismantled, the proto-me has to be cultivated to be developed into the full real me. Where does one find the roots of this? This is who I am. One root is the continuing stressors. If stressors continue in environment, one has to cling on to the dysfunctional me. One has to cling on, this is who I am, and one cannot let go because the stressors are active in environment. And very difficult in therapy to make person let go of what is protecting him from the continuing stressors. So he cannot let go of this is who I am. He can complain about it. He can express wish that I wish I was not this, but he can't let go of what he is because of the continuing stressors in the environment. Long-term social situation in the family or society can also create a very strong this is who I am, a pathological this is who I am, and one cannot let go because one has been in this situation for such a long time. In both these situations, either contemporary stressors are present or there are no contemporary stressors, but there is effect of long duration experience in the family or society. These two are still not the worst of situations. The worst situation comes about when there is a early life inner tragedy inside the mind, and that is coupled with these two situations. In early life, you can have mirroring failures, which can lead to creation of a pathological self. And then you click onto the pathological self saying, this is who I am, because there is nothing else to go, nowhere else to go. And the mirroring failures, as we have seen before, involve 5 elements, 5 A's. Acknowledgement, acceptance, affection, attention, admiration. In fact, the chronology will be acknowledgement, attention, acceptance, affection, and admiration. If there is a failure of these 5, you again have a very strong element of false self, a strong personality disorder, or a strong character pathology, and a strong this is who I am, clinging to the pathological part of oneself. Because a pathological part is created in the first place to deal with these mirroring failures. Similarly, there can be idealizing failures, not having good enough people around in early life. Or there can be worse, object loss. Early life object loss, which gives rise to annihilation anxiety at the very root. Thereafter, death anxiety. And then a series of events which I have described in the Valley Junction phenomena, the Valley Junction model of personality disorders, where Before the object loss, the person has very good, very ecstatic experiences with the object, and then the object loss takes place. If right at the start object loss takes place, by and large, we will be in the psychotic spectrum. If we are in the character pathology spectrum or the personality disorder spectrum, usually we would have a very good early life experience, no matter how short, a very intense, good early life experience followed by object loss. And this object loss will give rise to annihilation anxiety, death anxiety, anxiety of pain, intense anxiety of loss, rage at loss, guilt, an inferiority complex developing, I am not good enough and therefore the loss. Or it can be rationalized as I don't deserve it. And this valley situation, so once you were in a peak situation when you had good experiences with the object, the moment the object loss happens in early life, before that, the person is at the peak, the infant is at the peak because of good experiences. As the object loss happens, the infant falls, psychologically speaking, from the peak into a valley situation, where what is active is intense anxiety, intense pain, chaos, disintegration, and that gives rise to inferiority. And the way one comes out of it is by using defenses, and the nature of defenses which are used to come out determines the type of personality disorder one ends up with. So from there, the valley state, one jumps to a disorder peak state. And the difficulty of giving up this disorder peak state is that if you give up the disorder state, you will fall back into the valley state, which is unbearable given the amount of anxiety, pain, disintegration, fear of attack, rage, guilt, inferiority, all of which are active so intensely in that state. So it is the disorder actually is a escape, a resolution, a defense against falling into that valley state. It is the terror of the valley state which is the real terror. And behind that terror is object loss. And because of this, the split often remains open. And because of the split being open, there is also a constant fear of object attack. So the object loss goes hand in hand with object attack. So the root is the fear of object loss. Then there is a fear of object attack. And then there is a fear of emotional closeness. The first layer of fear of emotional closeness is one does not have habit of it. One is not equipped for it. Second layer of fear is the fear of attack. And the third layer is the fear of loss. The deepest layer is the fear of loss. Because one enters with this kind of a pre-Oedipal pathological situation into Oedipus, it's very difficult to get out of Oedipus with resolution. So in most cases, there is Oedipal entanglement also. But below that Oedipal entanglement is the phenomena of the peak valley phenomena, and below that is object loss. And apart from it, parallel to this situation, there is coexisting a murderous and torturous rage because of split being open and the parents not being perfect parent and frustrating us in attachment. So there is this murderous and torturous rage, guilt because of it, and rage again because of the guilt. This is Davanlu's central dynamic sequence concept. This is Freud's concept. This is more of a Kleinian concept. This is more of a quotient concept. All these concepts are actually in operation. at the root of why somebody holds on to a disorder, to a pathology, to a resistance. So one holds on because of object loss, fear of object loss, fear of object attack, fear of the valley state. One can hold on because of fear of Oedipal entanglement, that if one gives up the disorder state, one falls deep, and one of the stations in the falling is the station of Oedipal non-resolution, which has huge amount of guilt and castration, anxiety and object loss. But this object loss is secondary. The real object loss is the pre-Oedipal object loss. There is object loss in the Oedipus also, but the core difficulty is the pre-Oedipal object loss, much earlier than this Oedipus. And then there is this murderous and torturous rage, because of which one goes into self-destruction, because this rage towards the parent figure turns inwards. And then there is also this guilt, because of which one creates rage for self-destruction. So turning towards oneself of rage and creation of rage for self-destruction separately because of guilt, these two also make us cling onto a position of suffering and not give it up. So apart from the tragic holding state, apart from secondary gains, apart from the manic defense profit, apart from comfort with the known, apart from the early life object loss, apart from avoidance of falling into the Oedipus, unresolved Oedipus, there is also this thing which makes us cling in an act of self-destruction, which is partly because of guilt we want to punish ourselves, and partly we want to hurt somebody by hurting ourselves, and partly we want to complete our revenge in a vicarious way. How do you go into healing? The first question that comes up here is, do I need to be healed? Why can't I just be myself? Argument comes up that when you say you need to be healed, you need to go into a healthy state. It's a utilitarian argument of the capitalist society. It's a conformist argument. Why can't I just be my authentic self? And if my authentic self is the pathological self, so be it. The question thus just here is, it's of course a question of choice whether one wants to get healed or not. But the question there is it causing discomfort to you and society? And forget society for a moment. Is it causing discomfort to you? And is the discomfort intense enough for you to go into the healing process? If you enjoy it, you don't come for healing. You come for healing only when the cost-benefit analysis is on the side of the cost. So yes, if one wants to make a choice that this is who I am, it is one's personal choice. But then one has to live with the cost and not complain. However, people who come to for healing, they come because they feel the cost is too high and they want to undergo the pain of healing because that pain is much less compared to the pain of the disorder. How do we go about this healing in psychoanalysis and spirituality? In psychoanalysis, in cases of this type, the primary thing is safety. How do you provide safety to the patient? Because a person who is dealing with deep-seated infantile loss and infantile fear of attack, he can't really go deep into himself without a feeling of safety. He doesn't feel the world is safe enough. So the first thing to be created in the therapy room is safety. And a cohesion approach helps instead of the classical psychoanalytic approach. trying to create safety with ISTDP is a joke. Techniques which are based on challenges and confrontation are not the techniques which are best suited to create safety. Techniques which are based upon holding are far better suited to creating safety. Cohesion approach, existential humanistic approach, they are far better in creating safety than classical psychoanalytic approach. Catharsis, as much as we can do in as many variety of contexts we can do. We move from the leaf to the branch to the trunk to the root. And we start off with catharsis of small incidents. And many of them happen before one really goes deep. Then it is to help the patient see that he is essentially in the middle of an object relation disorder. That he is essentially into a problem of object relations. He wants close relations, he fears close relations. He is desperate to get close to people, he avoids people. I want people, I don't want people. So this has to be made clear to him again and again in a variety of situations before it sinks in very clearly to the person and some transformation happens. Internalization of a good object is a core necessity. This unfortunately happens at an unconscious level. Consciously, what happens is the patient tests out the therapist, whether the therapist is really safe to get close to. And this can take the form of irritating the therapist or making him angry by transferences, by defiance, by irritation, by projective identification. And if the therapist passes the test, and it's very difficult to pass this test, these are very strict examination papers, then the patient feels safe to internalize the good object the therapist appears to be. And this is a core necessity, and it takes time. Often what happens is, when you deal with some technique like ISTDP or EDT, we feel the defense work has given result after 2 years, but actually it is neither of it. It is the internalization of a good object which has happened unknown to us, outside of our theoretical construct. And that is what has enabled the person to move on with the healing process. And for this internalization of a good object, just as in case of creating safety, challenge-based therapies, confrontation-based therapies are not the best options. Holding-based therapies are far better options for creating safety and to facilitate internalization of a good object. And therefore, in psychoanalytic psychotherapy, the stance has to change. Initially to enable safety and internalization, and later on we can take the more classical interpretative stance, and then on we can move to challenge and confrontation. In most situations of this type, personality disorder, character pathology, this is who I am, the healing in therapy does not go 100%. It's not, the person is not fully healed from the roots, but 75% of healing takes place and some roots remain. And however, then there is a separation between the symptom and the suffering. And the symptom is so thoroughly understood that the suffering minimizes. And with that symptom associated with a small amount of suffering, the person learns to live a very healthy, happy and productive life. And the symptom then is termed as symptom by Lacan. So in most cases, we go to 75% and the person lives with the rest 25% without much suffering. And obviously, then there are no complaints. It's a choice of life. It's a choice of life in constraint, yet it is a choice of life. In spirituality, we don't see this suffering as purposeless suffering, as a causeless suffering, as an unfortunate event to which we are condemned. Spirituality sees even this suffering of character pathology, of personality disorder, of I am not good enough, like, and for that matter, any other suffering, as something which flows out of the self journey program of the self, the karma of past lives, and it is also there is a purpose of pathology. Many people say that had I not had this pathology for such a long time, I would not have achieved many things and I would have done many wrong things. So there is an objective profit of pathology also, of this range we are talking about. There may not be any objective profit in psychosis or mental retardation or autism, but in personality disorders, character disorder, character pathology, this is who I am type of pathology, there is definitely for most people some objective profit of pathology also. Personally, this is true for me also. I would not have achieved intellectually and spiritually much of what I have had I not had the pathology I had. So this spiritual principle that there is a profitable purpose of pathology is true. And spirituality uses holistic healing approach to heal anything, including disorders we are referring to. And the holistic healing basket includes yoga, idol therapy, energy healing, naturopathy, visualization, mantra, Gurdjieff even used certain dances, devotion, music, a much deeper and wider basket of healing spirituality has than psychoanalysis. Thank you.